My parents bought my sister a mansion using money meant for my education. I found out on a Tuesday afternoon in March, sitting in the financial aid office of a university I had worked toward for 6 years, watching a woman named Linda Cho, maybe 40, reading glasses, the specific patience of someone who delivers bad news for a living, slide a printout across her desk and say, very quietly, "I'm sorry. The account is empty." Not low, not short, empty. The number on the printout was 000. The number that was supposed to be there was $214,000. I remember the sound the chair made when I shifted. I remember the fluorescent light above me had a flicker that no one had fixed. I remember thinking, very clearly, this is a mistake. There has been a mistake. Because $214,000 doesn't just disappear. Because my grandmother had been building that account since I was 7 years old. Because I had been told, my entire life, that it was there. That it was mine. That it was waiting. I remember Linda Cho looking at me with the expression of someone who has already called my name twice and knows I haven't heard her. "Is there someone you'd like us to contact?" she said. There was, actually. I just didn't know yet what I was going to say to them. I also didn't know, sitting in that chair under the flickering fluorescent light, that my sister had posted 43 photos of her new house on Instagram that same week. That the house had 4 bedrooms and heated bathroom floors, and a farmhouse sink, and a backyard patio with string lights that she'd captioned, "Bless doesn't cover it." I didn't know any of that yet. But I was about to. My name is Jordan. I'm 24 years old. I grew up in a mid-sized city in Ohio, in a house that looked comfortable from the outside and felt complicated from the inside. The way a lot of houses do when you describe them to a therapist for the first time, and they start nodding before you've even gotten to the hard part. My parents, Martin and Diane, are not monsters. I want to be clear about that. They are ordinary people with an ordinary flaw, the kind that rarely announces itself but that shapes everything anyway. They love my sister more than they love me. They always have, and they made a financial decision that proved it, with a permanence that no holiday dinner or apologetic phone call can walk back. My sister's name is Amber. She is 27. She is beautiful in a way people comment on without being asked. She has been the center of my parents' world since the day she was born, and I don't say that to sound bitter, I say it because it is a fact. The same way gravity is a fact, the same way that certain things in families become so established, they stop being choices and start being atmosphere. Amber was the favorite. I was the other one, and for most of my childhood, I told myself that was fine. That love doesn't have to be equal to be sufficient. That what I had was enough. I believed that, mostly, until Linda Cho slid the printout across the desk, and I understood what sufficient had cost me. I need to tell you about my grandmother, because without her, none of this makes sense. Her name was Eleanor, my mother's mother. She was 81 when she died, 4 years before that Tuesday afternoon, and she was the kind of woman who kept a ledger by hand and called generosity a form of planning. She understood that money was not personality but protection, and she had made a decision when I was 7 years old and Amber was 10. She was going to fund our educations. Not our parents' retirement. Not a family vacation. Not a second car. She was going to make sure her granddaughters could not be stopped by the thing that had stopped her, which was the cost of not being able to afford the next step. She set up 2 accounts, one for Amber, one for me. She told us about them at Christmas when I was 9, sitting at the kitchen table, and she said it in that direct way she had, the way that left no room for misunderstanding. "This is for school," she said. "Not a car, not a wedding. School. You earn it by going." Amber said thank you. I said I was going to be a doctor. Eleanor laughed. She died when I was 20, and I was holding her hand. That is the last thing I want to say about Eleanor, because the rest of what I have to tell you is about what happened to what she left behind. Here's what I knew going into that Tuesday. I knew the account existed. I knew Eleanor had deposited $80,000 of her own savings over the years. Steady, careful, $5,000 here, $8,000 there. My mother had told me this, more than once. She mentioned it the way parents mention things they want you to feel grateful for. Not as information, exactly, but as context for gratitude. I knew that after Eleanor died, her estate had distributed additional funds. My mother handled the estate. She was the executor. She told me my share had gone into the account. She didn't give me a number. I didn't ask. I trusted her. That is a sentence I have turned over 1,000 times since that afternoon. I trusted her. I had applied to a nursing program in Philadelphia. Competitive, rigorous, expensive. $42,000 a year. I had applied quietly, almost secretly, the way you apply for things you're afraid to want. Because every time I mentioned an ambition that required leaving Ohio, my mother went quiet in a way that made me feel like I had said something wrong. I got in. I told my parents over dinner on a Thursday night in February. My father put down his fork, my mother smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Amber, who was visiting for the weekend, said it was far. "It's fine," my mother said. "The account will cover it." That was February. The Tuesday in Linda Cho's office was March. 4 weeks. That's how long passed between my mother saying the account will cover it and Linda Cho telling me the account was empty. I have thought about that timing every single day since. My mother answered on the second ring when I called her from the parking structure. She sounded relaxed. I noticed that immediately and couldn't name what it meant, not then. Mom, I said, I was at the financial aid office today. A pause. Barely a pause. But I've reconstructed that call in my head more times than I can count. And the pause was there. Okay, she said. The account is empty. A longer pause. What do you mean empty? 0. The balance is 0. That can't be right, she said. There must be a mix-up with the account numbers. She said it quickly. Looking back, I think I know what that energy was. It was the energy of a person reaching for the explanation they had pre-prepared, like a key already cut for a lock she knew was coming. I'll make some calls, she said. Don't panic. These things happen with accounts. I said okay. I hung up. I sat with the printout. She did not call back that night. She didn't call back for 3 days. I want you to hold that. 3 days. In those 3 days, I called the bank directly and learned that my name had never been on the account. Not technically. It had always been in my parents' names. I had never, legally, had any claim to the money I'd been told was mine for 17 years. And on the second day of those 3 days, while I was sitting at my kitchen table at 11 at night unable to sleep, I opened Instagram. Amber's account was public. It always had been. The most recent post was a grid of 12 photos. The house, their new house, room by room. The kitchen with the quartz countertops and the farmhouse sink catching the afternoon light. The primary bathroom with the soaking tub. The finished basement. The backyard with the patio and the string lights and the kids running through the grass in the early evening. The caption said, "Pinch me, we're home." The post was dated October 14th. I sat there and did the math in my head. October. That was 5 months ago. My parents had come to Thanksgiving in November. My mother had sat at my table, eaten my food, asked about my applications, and said she was so excited for me. And somewhere underneath that conversation, underneath the pie and the small talk and her hand on my shoulder when she hugged me goodbye, she had known that the account she was about to tell me would cover everything was already empty. I put my phone down. I did not sleep that night. When my mother finally called back on day 3, her voice had a different quality. Measured, prepared. The way someone sounds when they've had 72 hours to decide what they're going to say. I spoke to the bank, she said, and I need to tell you something. Okay, I said. Some of the money was used, she said. For the house. The house? I said. What house? She told me in pieces, the way people tell you things they know will hurt, a kind of rationing that is its own form of cruelty. She told me Amber and her husband Derek had found a house in September, that it was a good school district, that there had been a narrow window in a competitive market, that they'd had to move quickly, that the kids needed the space. I said, you used my education money to buy Amber a house. It wasn't, she started. Mom. It was family money, Jordan. It was always family money. That word. Family. The way it was deployed, the way it was meant to dissolve the boundary between what was mine and what was everyone's. To make objecting to the use of my money seem like an act of selfishness against the family unit, as if the family was a body and I was a cell refusing to share its nutrients. How much? I said. She didn't answer. How much of it? Most of it, she said. How much is most? She told me. $189,000. I put the phone on the table, not hung up. Put down, and I sat with the sound of my mother's voice coming through the speaker saying my name until it stopped. I called my father 2 days later. I called him because my mother and I had developed a conversational dynamic that was less communication and more mutual excavation, each of us carefully digging around the thing in the center without touching it directly. My father had always been more capable of directness when cornered. He disliked confrontation, but disliked sustained ambiguity more. Dad, I said, walk me through how this decision was made. He sighed. My father has a specific sigh he produces when he has done something he knows was wrong and is hoping the conversation ends before he has to say so out loud. I've heard it my entire life. Amber found the house in September, he said. The market was moving fast. She and Derek couldn't cover the down payment on their own. We had the liquidity. You had my liquidity, I said. The account was in our names. Because I was 7 when Grandma set it up. Legally, he said, and stopped. That word, legally, sitting in the silence between us like a brick through a window. Did you plan to tell me? I said. We were going to figure out a way to replace it, he said. Over what timeline? He didn't answer. Dad, she came to Thanksgiving. She sat at my table. She said she was excited about Philadelphia. She knew. Silence. Did she think I would never find out? Very quietly, he said, we thought you'd handle it. There it was. Not cruelty, not malice. Something almost worse than both. The simple, settled assumption that I would handle it. That I was the one who always handled it. That the damage could be directed at me because I had demonstrated, over 24 years, that I was capable of absorbing things quietly without requiring anyone to answer for them. I was the daughter who would be fine. I said, okay, Dad, and hung up. Now, here is the part I want you to pay very close attention to, because this is where I stopped being passive. I did not call my parents back. I did not send a 3 a.m. text. I did not show up at their house. Because I understood, for the first time, that emotion spent too early is just noise, and that if I was going to get anything back, I needed to know exactly what I was working with before I said another word. I drove to my parents' house on a Saturday morning while my mother was out. My father let me in. He looked like a man who had been expecting this visit and was hoping it would feel like closure. I told him I wanted to look through Eleanor's documents, the boxes in the spare room. He said okay. I was in that room for 4 hours. What I found, inside a manila folder labeled Estate, Eleanor M., Final Documents, was a letter. Not the will, a supplemental letter. 2 pages. Eleanor's handwriting, small, precise. The handwriting of someone who grew up treating writing as a reflection of character. Dated 14 months before her death. Addressed to my mother. Eleanor had been specific. I mean word for word, no room for interpretation. Specific. The funds in the education accounts were to be used exclusively for each granddaughter's post-secondary education. In the event either granddaughter chose not to pursue further education, the funds were to be held until age 30 and dispersed directly. And then this sentence, the sentence I read 4 times. The accounts were not to be used for any other purpose, including real estate, household expenses, or gifts to any other family member. She had written it down. She had handed it to my mother directly. And my mother had put it in a manila folder in a spare room box and used the money anyway. I photographed every page with my phone. All 12 photos. Then I put the letter back exactly where I'd found it. Then I thanked my father for letting me look, and told him I hadn't found what I was looking for. He looked relieved. That was a mistake. Rebecca Moss had been practicing estate and probate law in Ohio for 19 years. Her assistant Marcus offered me water when I walked in, and I would later learn he had been with her for 11 years and could tell within 30 seconds of intake whether a client had a case. He poured the water without being asked. I showed Rebecca the photographs on my phone. She read the letter twice without speaking. Then she looked up. "Was your mother the executor of the estate?" she said. "Yes." "Do you have the final estate accounting? The court filing that documented how assets were distributed?" "I didn't know it existed." "It's a public record," she said. "When an executor distributes an estate through probate, they file an accounting with the court. Every asset, every distribution, it's all there." She folded her hands. "A supplemental letter of instruction isn't always legally binding on its own," she said, "but it establishes intent. It establishes what your grandmother communicated, in writing, directly to your mother. Combined with an estate accounting that shows these funds were released to your mother for a designated educational purpose, and then records showing $189,000 went to a real estate transaction without your knowledge or consent." She paused. "That's a meaningful chain of events." "What can I actually do?" I said. "We get the estate accounting first," she said. "Then we write a letter." The estate accounting took 11 days. I want to tell you about those 11 days not because the waiting itself is interesting, but because of what happened inside them, because this is where I found the thing that changed the temperature of everything. I was still going to work. I was still making dinner. I was still performing the ordinary surface of my life while underneath, something was building that I wasn't ready to name yet. My mother texted me on day 4, "Just checking in on my girl. How's everything?" I stared at that text for a long time. I typed back, "Good, busy with work, talk soon." On day 7, I got a text from Amber. She sent a photo. The backyard patio, evening light, the string lights glowing, her 2 kids sitting in little wooden chairs with hot chocolate. She'd captioned it, "Our happy place." I looked at that photo for a while. Then I went back through her Instagram account. Properly this time, not the quick scroll I'd done that insomniac night. I went post by post. And somewhere around October 18th, 4 days after the house closed, I found something I hadn't seen before. A story she'd archived, a reel. Amber, standing in the empty kitchen of the new house before the furniture arrived, walking the camera through each room. Voiceover of her own voice, soft and a little emotional. And at the end, standing in the middle of what would become the living room, she said, "I have to say, and I know she probably won't see this, but Grandma Eleanor would have loved this house. I like to think part of this is her." I watched that reel 3 times. Part of this is her. She wasn't wrong. Part of it was Eleanor. Specifically, it was Eleanor's money, pulled from an account Eleanor had designated for my education, and Amber either understood that or was performing innocence so convincing she had fooled even herself. I didn't know which yet, but I was about to find out. Rebecca called on day 11. She had the estate accounting. "The 2 accounts are clearly labeled," she said. "Education fund. Your name on one, Amber's on the other. Released to your mother as trustee for their designated purpose." A pause, which means the designation is on record, the court record. Another pause. "And then we have $189,000 moving to a real estate transaction with no documentation of your awareness or consent." "Is that enough?" I said. "It's enough to file a formal review of executor conduct," she said, asking the court to examine whether the executor adhered to the estate's documented purposes. She was quiet for a moment. "There's something else. Once we file, the discovery process begins. Your mother's financial records, her communications from that period, emails, texts, all of it becomes accessible." I sat with what that meant. If anyone else was involved, Rebecca said carefully, in the decision or the planning of it, that would surface. I thought about Amber's reel. Part of this is her file, I said. I need to tell you what my parents did when the letter from Rebecca's office arrived, because they did not do what I expected. I expected silence. Maybe a panicked call. Maybe a tearful, stumbling conversation where my mother cried and my father tried to broker peace, and the whole thing resolved the way family conflict usually resolves. Quietly, with someone absorbing the damage in the name of keeping things comfortable. Instead, my father called me within 40 minutes of the letter being delivered, and his voice had a quality I'd never heard from him before. Not guilt, not contrition, something harder. You hired a lawyer, he said. I did. Jordan, he stopped, started again. You didn't need to do this. We said we were going to figure out a way to replace it. Over what timeline, Dad? We just needed time. You had 4 weeks between telling me the account would cover Philadelphia and letting me walk into Linda Cho's office, I said. You had 5 months between the house closing and Thanksgiving dinner at my table. You had years if we're counting from when Eleanor died. At what point in all of that time were you planning to figure it out? Silence. We didn't think you'd go this far, he said. And there it was. That was the sentence, the one that told me exactly where we all stood. They had made their calculation, and I was part of it. The part that didn't push back, the part that absorbed things, the part that would be fine. And the fact of a lawyer's letter had not produced remorse so much as it had produced surprise. Genuine surprise. They had genuinely not thought I would go this far. I said, then you didn't know me as well as you thought. I hung up. 2 hours later, my mother called. Her voice had a quality I'd never heard before. Not anger, something harder. The particular hardness of a person who has been caught and decided their best option is to hold their position. This is a family matter, she said. Mom, Eleanor left a letter. Silence. She wrote down what the money was for. She told you, in writing, and you used it for Amber's down payment. You don't understand what Amber needed. I needed it too. You have a job, you're capable. Amber has 2 children, and Derek's income isn't. Mom. I stopped her. Amber has a 4-bedroom house, with heated floors and a patio with string lights that she posts about constantly. I had $214,000 put away by my grandmother, who made her intentions absolutely clear in writing, and you used $189,000 of it and then told me there was a mix-up with the account numbers. A long pause. What does your attorney want? She said. A repayment plan for the full $189,000, structured through a legal agreement with interest, executed within 30 days. She said she needed to speak to my father. I said take a week. She took 3 days, and what came back was not what I expected. Their counteroffer was $60,000. A lump sum, one time, no legal agreement, no structure. My father delivered it with the tone of someone presenting something generous, like I should be grateful for 60 cents on a dollar and the privilege of not having to involve attorneys anymore. He even said, and I want you to hear this exactly, we think that's fair, given the circumstances. Given the circumstances. I took it to Rebecca. She said one word, no. Then, she told me what we were doing next. We filed the formal probate review on a Wednesday morning. That afternoon, I went to clinical observation hours at a hospital 2 miles from my apartment. I watched a nurse named Pamela, 14 years in the ICU, manage 3 patients simultaneously with the calm efficiency of someone who has learned that panic costs more time than it saves. She caught me watching her at one point. You look like you're somewhere else, she said. I'm here, I said. She looked at me for a second. Whatever it is, it'll still be there at the end of the shift, she said. So be here. I was here. I tried to be here. But on the train home, I thought about the filing sitting in a court database now with my mother's name on it and a paper trail she had not anticipated, and I thought about the estate accounting, sitting in Rebecca's folder with designated educational purpose stamped on it in the language of probate courts, and I thought about the fact that my parents' financial records were now accessible in a way they had not been yesterday morning. I thought about all of it. And then the discovery results came in. Rebecca called me on a Thursday morning, and her voice had a quality I was learning to recognize, the evenness that meant she had something real. The financial records are what we expected, she said. But there's something else. Your mother's email communications from the September-October period. She paused. There are emails between your mother and Amber. I went very still. Amber initiated it, Rebecca said. Early September. She emailed your mother asking whether the education accounts could be accessed for the down payment. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Not an accident, not a spontaneous decision made in the compressed urgency of a narrow market window. A question, a direct question from Amber, about whether my education money could be used. My mother's response? I said. She said she believed the accounts could be accessed, and she would look into what was needed. And then? 2 weeks later, Amber asking whether the funds would be available, the down payment amount confirmed by Derek's banker. And my mother said yes. She said yes. There was no email asking me. There was no email that so much as mentioned me. There was an email chain in which the question of my education funds was treated as a logistical matter between my mother and my sister, and it was resolved in my sister's favor, and no one said a word to me until I walked into Linda Cho's office. I looked out the window of the coffee shop where I was sitting and watched a woman push a stroller past the glass. Amber knew, I said. She asked, Rebecca said. There is a difference, and I knew it, even in that moment, between asking and deciding. Between my sister reaching for something that was in reach and my parents being the ones who actually opened the hand. Amber had asked. My parents had answered. The decision was my parents to make, and they had made it. But Amber had asked. She had asked, and I needed her to know that I knew. I sat with that for 4 days before I called her. 4 days. Because there was a version of me that wanted to call her immediately. Hot, with all the evidence loaded. And there was another version that understood that a conversation entered in heat is a conversation you don't control. And I had learned, slowly, and with difficulty, and at significant cost, that control was the more useful currency. So I waited. I thought about what I knew, and she didn't know that I knew. I thought about the reel she'd posted, her voice going soft and a little emotional. Part of this is her. I thought about all the Instagram posts, the string lights, the farmhouse sink, the little wooden chairs. On day 4, I called her. She was bright on the phone at first, warm, asking how I was, mentioning a playdate, telling me the kids had discovered a cartoon she was already sick of. I let her finish. Then I said, Amber, I need to tell you something. The brightness shifted, just slightly. The way a frequency shifts before you consciously register the change. I found Eleanor's letter, I said. The one she wrote to Mom about what the money was for. Silence. I also have the estate accounting, the court filing, with designated educational purpose on it. More silence. And I have the emails, I said. The silence that followed that was different from the others. This one had weight in it. This one was the silence of someone deciding something. Jordan, she started. I know you asked, I said. Not raised, not accusatory. Just the fact of it, set down between us like an object on a table. She didn't deny it. That's the thing I've thought about most since. She didn't deny it. I didn't think Mom would actually, she started. You knew what the money was for, Amber. I know, she said, very quietly. You knew, because we were both 9 years old at Grandma's kitchen table, and she told us. You were there. I know, she said again. So when you sent that email in September, when you asked if the accounts could be accessed, you knew what you were asking about. A very long pause. I heard her exhale. Yes, she said. I knew. I had expected that admission to feel like something. Vindication maybe, or anger, or the specific heat of being seen accurately after a long time of being invisible. Instead, what I felt was tired. The kind of tired that lives underneath everything when you've been carrying something heavy and you've finally put it down, and the relief and the weight are somehow the same feeling. I'm not coming after you legally, I said. That's not what this is. My parents made the decision. They're the ones answering for it. But I needed you to know that I know, and I needed to hear you say it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm sorry, Jordan, and she meant it, not the performed sorry of someone trying to make a problem go away. The sorry of someone who has had 4 days, or maybe many more than that, maybe since October, to sit with something and has not been able to make it comfortable. Okay, I said. Is that enough? She said. Not yet, I said. But it's somewhere to start. The settlement negotiation happened 2 weeks after discovery concluded. I want to be honest that there was no dramatic courtroom moment, no public scene, no table-flipping holiday dinner where the truth detonated in front of witnesses. There was Rebecca on calls with my parents' attorney, a man named Gerald Wynn, working through numbers and terms over 4 days. But before that, before the settlement, there was one more conversation I need to tell you about. My father called me on a Sunday afternoon, not about the legal process, or not officially about it anyway. He said he'd been thinking. He said he wanted to talk. I said okay. We're not bad people, he said. I know, I said. We made a mistake. You made a decision, I said. A decision and a mistake are different. A mistake is accidental. What happened had emails and a timeline and a closing date. He was quiet. What I keep coming back to, I said, is Thanksgiving. She sat at my table, Dad. She asked about my applications. She said she was excited for me. She didn't know how to tell you, he said. She had 4 weeks between telling me the account would cover it and letting me walk into Linda Cho's office. She had 4 weeks to tell me, and she didn't. Silence. We thought you'd be okay, he said again. I know you did, I said. That's the part that's hardest to explain to people. It wasn't cruelty. It was just, you thought I'd absorb it. You thought I'd handle it. And I was always the one who handled things, so you just aimed the damage at me and assumed I'd manage. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, very quietly, I think that's right. That was the closest thing to an apology I got from my father. Not the words I'm sorry. Just the acknowledgement that what I had said was accurate, that the calculation had been made, that I had been the one it was made about. It was not enough, but it was real, and real was more useful to me than performance. The settlement, I said. Rebecca's terms. I need you to agree to them. He said, I know. What I got was this. A legally structured repayment agreement for $163,000, dispersed over 3 years in quarterly installments, with a security interest in my parents' home as collateral, plus a separate payment for my legal costs. Rebecca had told me going in that the full $189,000 was aggressive and that 80 to 85% was realistic, given the nature of the fiduciary argument. $163,000 is 86%. I signed on a Thursday afternoon in Rebecca's office. Marcus brought me water. I drank it this time. My mother called me 7 months after the agreement was signed. I was at my kitchen table on a Sunday evening, Philadelphia in the fall, dark early the way it gets. I let her name sit on my screen for 3 rings. Then I answered. She said she'd been thinking about me. She asked about school. I told her school was hard and I was learning things. Then she said, I want to say something. I waited. When you called me from Linda Cho's office, she said. I told you there must have been a mix-up with the account numbers. I remember, I said. That wasn't true. I knew exactly what had happened. I just wasn't ready to tell you. A pause. I'm ashamed of that. I sat with it. Okay, I said. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Mom? She didn't answer, and in that silence, I understood something I had been moving toward for months. My mother was looking for the thing I had always given her before, the resolution, the moment where I absorbed the damage and let the family return to its equilibrium. She was looking for low-maintenance Jordan to appear and make this manageable. I'm not angry at you, I said. But I'm also not going to tell you it's okay. It isn't okay yet. The repayment is a legal outcome, not an emotional one. And I'm still figuring out what I feel, and I need you to let me do that, without needing me to make you feel better about it on your timeline. A long silence. Okay, she said. I do love you, I said. That part isn't complicated. She said, I love you too. Then we talked about the weather and what she'd been watching on television. Ordinary talk, the kind that doesn't resolve anything but keeps a thread alive. The first installment arrived on the 1st of February, a bank transfer. I watched it appear. $13,583.33. I did not feel the vindication I had expected. I thought I would feel the specific rightness of a wrong being corrected. Instead, I felt something more like tiredness, and something more like grief, and something more like an awareness that restitution is not the same as repair. What it is a start. I am in my 2nd year of nursing school now. I am better with patients than I expected to be. My supervising nurse Diana, 22 years in the field, told me last month I was good at staying calm when the situation was moving fast. I told her I'd had some practice. She looked at me like she might ask what I meant. Then she decided not to. That was probably the right call. I still have Eleanor's letter. Not the original. I put that back in the manila folder in the spare room. But the photographs, 12 of them, sharp and clear, Eleanor's careful handwriting filling each frame, backed up in 3 places. She wrote in the last paragraph, a girl who can pay for her own education can pay for anything. That is the only inheritance worth giving. She was right. She was right, and she was robbed. Not of money, exactly. Of the ability to give me what she'd intended, of the knowledge that what she'd built had gone where she'd aimed it. I think about what she would have made of all of it. The letter she wrote sitting across from my mother's face, the filing, the emails, the settlement, the quarterly payments arriving like clockwork into an account that now has my name on it. I think she would have said, good. She was a woman who understood that the work of protecting yourself begins long before you need protecting, and that the people who love you are not always the same as the people who will safeguard you. I understand that now too. Amber and I had dinner 2 months ago. A real dinner, not just coffee. She brought the kids, which I hadn't expected, and my nephew sat next to me and told me for 40 minutes about a documentary he'd watched about octopuses, with the absolute authority of a 6-year-old who has decided this is the most important topic in the world. Amber watched us from across the table with an expression I couldn't quite name. After the kids were asleep in the car on the drive back, she said, I talked to a therapist. How is it? I said. She keeps asking me why I thought it was okay to ask. I didn't say anything. I don't have a good answer yet, Amber said. I know, I said. Are we going to be okay? She said. I looked out the window at the streetlights, at the suburb we'd grown up in, the particular shape of a place that holds everything you've ever felt about belonging and not belonging simultaneously. I think so, I said. I think we're working on it. She nodded. The 3rd quarterly payment came on the 1st of August. Same amount, same transfer. I was in a coffee shop with a textbook open and a clinical placement to get to by 11. I noted it. Closed the app. Went back to the textbook. There is work to do. There has always been work to do. The difference is that now I'm doing it with the resources I was supposed to have, and with a clarity about this family and about myself that I could not have gotten any other way. Eleanor used to say the most useful thing you could leave a person was a floor to stand on. I have one now. I built part of it myself, but I made sure to collect what was owed first.